we have confirmation of a case of inhalation anthrax.
A brilliant scientist is recruited by the FBI to investigate a deadly biological attack on U.S. soil.
There was definitely a widespread assumption at the time that Al-Qaeda was responsible.
Then suddenly the scientist becomes the #1 suspect.
He had the knowledge and the means to do it.
Could previously classified information prove his innocence?
Most people that work with him do not believe that Bruce had anything to do with this.
Or did the truth die with Bruce Ivins? In the early hours of July 27, 2008, the wife of microbiologist Dr. Bruce Ivins wakes to find her husband is not in bed.
Ivins' wife finds him in the bathroom. He's unconscious, he's not responsive, but he's still breathing.
Dr. Ivins is no ordinary scientist. He's a military microbiologist, a world-renowned expert on deadly bacteria, specializing in anthrax.
Anthrax is a spore-forming bacteria. It can cause respiratory failure, systemic organ failure, and eventually death.
Ivins works at the U.S. Army Institute of Infectious Diseases at Fort Detrick, Maryland. Behind these fences, Dr. Ivins has been perfecting vaccines to protect America against bioweapons since 1980.
Dr. Ivins was a very well-renowned researcher, had been published, was highly regarded and esteemed within the microbiology community.
For 2 decades, Ivins learns all there is to know about anthrax and how to defend against it. Then, in 2001, America is hit by not 1, but 2 deadly strikes. First, September 11th, the most devastating terror attack in U.S. history. With the country reeling, every American wonders if and when the next attack will come.
People were terrified. They had no idea if a follow-on assault was going to come. They had no idea really how to prepare for one. It was an extremely scary thing.
Fear turns to reality 2 weeks later. Still in shock, America is attacked with anthrax.
It's just after the 9/11 attacks.
The anthrax attacks in 2001 were a clear and present danger to the United States.
We hadn't seen a large-scale biological weapons attack like that before.
22 civilians are infected. 5 die. Ivins is recruited by the FBI for his specialized knowledge of anthrax. He's a key figure in an army of 90 scientists enlisted by the Bureau to hunt down the killer. The investigation lasts 7 long years. Then, as the FBI prepares to arrest Dr. Bruce Ivins, he is discovered unconscious on his bathroom floor.
Within 2 days, Ivins is dead.
As Dr. Bruce Ivins is named by the FBI as the only suspect in the anthrax murders, America comes to grips with the frightening reality of what appears to be homegrown terrorism. But to this day, there is still doubt that Bruce Ivins really was the culprit. The story of the anthrax mailer and Dr. Ivins begins in Florida on October 2nd, 2001. Just 4 weeks after the 9/11 attacks, Dr. Larry Bush is the first to suspect that another very different attack has begun on U.S. soil.
I got called around 7:30 in the morning on October 2nd, 2001. They said, "We think we have a man here with meningitis."
The patient is 63-year-old photo editor Robert Stevens. He is critically ill with a mysterious infection.
I took the spinal fluid, the slide, and looked at it under the microscope and observed an overwhelming amount of bacteria, which were blue, rod-shaped bacilli. And I could only think of one bacilli that would make them this ill, this fast, is anthrax.
Worse still, he discovers it's inhalation anthrax, the deadliest type.
Inhalational anthrax has about a 90% mortality rate.
He went into multi-system organ failure and never recovered.
Authorities scramble to track the source of the anthrax, hoping it's local and containable. Then, on October 12th, just a month after the 9/11 terror attacks, there's another anthrax victim in New York, followed by others in D.C.
Today, we have confirmation of a case of inhalation anthrax.
Over the next month, new infections are reported almost daily. This is no natural epidemic. It's a deliberate assault on American citizens.
The anthrax attacks terrified the United States. They came right after the terrorist attack of September 11th and seemed to many people like it was a follow-on attack.
We were already at a point of heightened fear and paranoia, and then you throw in a biological weapon that we can't control.
Not only would terrorists fly planes into buildings, but they had mastered terrifying biological warfare capabilities.
So these anthrax attacks were very, very scary.
Anonymous letters laced with anthrax powder are being sent to media outlets and U.S. senators. The killer is dubbed the Anthrax Mailer. Identity unknown, but mission crystal clear.
All of the envelopes included a photocopied letter that basically said, this is anthrax, death to America, death to Israel, Allah is great.
Chillingly, the letters are dated September 11th.
There was definitely a widespread assumption at the time that al-Qaeda was responsible for the anthrax mailings.
We had to take that threat very seriously, that this was, in fact, the work of an international terrorist organization.
Throughout the fall of 2001, the disease strikes in Washington, D.C., New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. 4 more people die. The capital goes on lockdown. Then, at the end of November, the mailings stop as suddenly as they'd started. It appears that the anthrax killer has gone underground. And it's up to Special Agent in Charge, Richard Lambert, to find the attacker.
There are the 4 possibilities. 1, this was an act by international terrorists. 2nd, it was an act by domestic terrorists. 3rd, it was a state-sponsored attack. And the 4th possibility is that it was an individual lone wolf.
Lambert heads up the National FBI investigation.
Our first suspicion criteria is access. The investigation essentially focused on 2 prongs. The first prong of the investigation focused on identifying those people who had the means, the motive, and the opportunity to commit the crime.
The second prong, using America's wealth of scientific resources to trace the anthrax to its source. To that end, the FBI enlists the nation's top specialists. Among the first to be recruited is Dr. Bruce Ivins.
Bruce was asked to be involved very early on because of his vast experience working with anthrax.
Ivins' colleague at the Fort Detrick Biodefense Facility, antibiotic expert Henry Hine, is also recruited.
The concern at that time was that it might be resistant to our frontline antibiotics.
The FBI also turns to Dr. Paul Keim, an Arizona-based world expert on anthrax DNA.
The FBI called me up and said that they were shipping a sample of the anthrax to us. We were maybe the only place in the world that could handle live anthrax and do the DNA analysis as well.
What Dr. Keim discovers from analysis of that sample will send the investigation in a terrifying new direction and turn the spotlight on a new set of suspects, the American scientists the FBI has been relying on to crack the case. And chief among them, Bruce Ivins.
One of the questions was, did you do it?
Just weeks after the events of September 11th in 2001, with America still reeling, a second wave of attacks comes in the form of anthrax powder, sent out in the mail. Many suspect that the same terrorist group that organized the plane attacks is using a new and horrifying tactic.
This is the first time in the United States where we're seeing a biological pathogen used as a murder weapon to actually kill people.
On October 4th, 2001, 2 days after the first case is diagnosed, a sample of the deadly anthrax is sent to Dr. Paul Keim's lab in Flagstaff, Arizona.
You're working with something very dangerous, and so you know you have to focus.
If he can identify the exact strain, it could lead to the killer.
Once the culture came into the laboratory, it had to be processed in a fashion that the people in the laboratory were safe. And so we were working under biosafety level precautions. The box was then opened up in a containment hood. That containment hood protects the people, but also protects the sample from being contaminated.
With American lives on the line, Dr. Keim and his team worked through the night to unlock the bacteria's genetic secrets.
A small portion of that culture was taken out and DNA was then extracted from it. The DNA then was examined for DNA fingerprint patterns at different places in its genome. Sometime in the middle of the morning, we began to get the results off of the DNA sequencers.
Dr. Keim can't believe his eyes. Killer anthrax is the so-called AIM strain, which originates in the United States. That means it's homegrown, made in U.S. labs by American scientists.
The AIM strain is a laboratory strain that became a standard research tool around the United States. It was in 1981 that this strain was isolated from a cow that died of anthrax in Texas. It was sent to the U.S. Army facility in Fort Detrick, Maryland, and there it was established as a very important research tool.
This is the facility where Dr. Bruce Ivins works. He's part of the team who identifies it as one of the deadliest strains ever discovered. From that point on, the AIM strain becomes Ivins' research anthrax of choice.
If you're designing a vaccine to give our soldiers who are going to war, you want our vaccine to work against the hottest, deadliest, most virulent strain of anthrax out there.
For 20 years, the AIM strain is cultivated by Dr. Bruce Ivins and other microbiologists across the U.S. to advance the science of anthrax vaccines. Now that strain is being used to kill innocent people. Given the high security surrounding the strain, it no longer appears likely the attack could be the work of Islamic jihadists. Now all eyes turn to the scientists with access to the deadly bacteria.
The AIM strain that was used pinpointed someone in the scientific community, or someone with at least a considerable amount of scientific knowledge that had access to it.
I was definitely a suspect early on in the investigation. My laboratory had multiple examples of the AIM strain. They started asking us questions about our background. Did we hate the government? And as they did that, they began to get profiles on each of us.
All of us were polygraphed. One of the questions was a flat out, did you do it?
As someone with easy access to and intimate knowledge of the AIM strain, Dr. Bruce Ivins is also singled out for a polygraph.
It was the opinion of the polygrapher, as well as the chart reviewers at FBI headquarters, that Dr. Ivins had passed that polygraph exam.
But polygraphs are not foolproof, and Ivins and his colleagues remain under the FBI microscope. Some are given warnings that they're being watched.
I came home one night late, came out the next morning My vehicle was unlocked and everything was removed from my glove compartment and very neatly laid out on the seat like somebody was taking pictures of it. It was sort of like a message that we've been here.
Then, in the summer of 2002, the FBI investigation homes in on a former colleague of Ivins and Heim at the Fort Detrick Army Biodefense Center. A virologist who has written an unpublished novel about a fictional bioterror attack on Washington, Dr. Stephen Hatfill.
Dr. Hatfill was taking large doses of antibiotics at the time these attacks occurred.
Could Dr. Hatfill have taken the antibiotics to protect himself while filling letters with anthrax?
It was one of those suspicion criteria that we were looking at and evaluated, and certainly raised an eyebrow at the time.
Dr. Hatfill is publicly announced as a person of interest, but a search of his apartment uncovers nothing. And his doctor confirms that the antibiotics were prescribed for nothing more sinister than a sinus infection. The FBI has the wrong man.
I want to look my fellow Americans directly in the eye and declare to them, I am not the anthrax killer.
Hatfill demands a public apology from the FBI and sues them for $5.82 million. So this is a huge black eye for the FBI. It's basically publicly associated an innocent man with an unresolved terrorist attack.
I had absolutely nothing to do with this terrible crime.
The anthrax mailer is still at large. The FBI is back at square one. But a scientific breakthrough is about to turn the spotlight on Bruce Ivins. In 2002, the FBI is hunting the anthrax mailer. They suspect that the bioterrorist is not an Islamic jihadist like those behind 9/11, but an American scientist whose poisoned letters have taken 5 lives.
They're confirmed as anthrax deaths.
But the trail has gone cold.
We really had no smoking gun. There were no fingerprints on the letters, no human DNA.
In the absence of conventional clues, the FBI turns to science and the anthrax contained in the letters. It's identified as the AIM strain, but 16 separate U.S. laboratories used that strain for research.
The AIM strain was identical. We were not able to differentiate the AIM strain from my laboratory from one that came from a laboratory in Texas, for example.
To find which laboratories cultivated the powder in the letters requires knowing more than just the strain or subspecies of anthrax. It requires identifying the specific family or colony that spawned the sample, something that has never been done before. The breakthrough comes at the Army Biodefense Center at Fort Detrick.
A couple of scientists realized that the letter powder actually contained different morphologies, different colony, different looking types of anthrax.
They stumble upon the discovery while cultivating the killer anthrax in petri dishes.
There clearly was something different because they were different looking on a plate.
These 4 different growth patterns are a sign of 4 particular anomalies in the anthrax DNA. Scientists realize these anomalies, known as morphs, are as unique as a fingerprint.
The AIM strain is like a race of people, but within the race of people, you can tell the individuals apart by looking at morphological differences like height or eye color. Likewise, with anthrax, if you know what the morphology is, you can tell one type of the AIM strain from other types of the AIM strain.
To build a profile of that morphology, they must sequence the entire DNA genome of the anthrax sample.
We knew we needed to characterize it genetically. And the problem is that before this case occurred, the anthrax genome had never before been sequenced.
Dr. Paul Keim's original tests only went far enough to identify the sample's particular strain. Now, scientists will have to delve millions of times deeper, mapping every single strand of DNA. The challenge falls to genetic specialist Dr. Dave Rasko.
The process of genome sequencing is figuring out all the bases, the G's, A's, T's, and C's within the organism, their order and orientation, and putting it all back together. It's like putting together a puzzle of 5 million pieces, and it's all sky.
In a scientific first, that genetic jigsaw puzzle takes shape, and the code of the deadly anthrax is cracked.
Once we completed the decoding of the genome, we had a fingerprint, a DNA fingerprint of the actual anthrax that was used in the attacks.
Now begins a painstaking 6-year process, sifting through over 1,000 anthrax samples from labs around the world. It's like looking for a needle in a scientific haystack.
The FBI subpoenaed samples of the Ames strain from each of our labs. These were then extracted for their DNA and examined for the signatures of the morphs that were found in the letters.
At last, in late 2007, there's a match. The DNA leads not to just a single lab, but to a single flask. RMR 1029.
That one particular flask, RMR 1029, contained all of the morphs that they also observed in the anthrax letters themselves.
The FBI believes it's found the smoking gun. And the man who appears to have his hands on the flask in question has been right under its nose all along. Dr. Bruce Ivins.
Bruce Ivins had been the custodian of this flask since the late 1990s. It had been in his possession.
Dr. Ivins has been a lead scientist in the hunt for the anthrax mailer. Now, in a dramatic twist, the evidence points back at him.
He had the knowledge and the means to do it.
For Dr. Ivins' colleagues, the revelation is a shock. They know him as a mild-mannered family man and dedicated researcher.
He was a diligent and careful scientist.
He's married, 2 adopted children,
Had a nice sense of humor.
known to play keyboards in his church band, generally considered a fun-loving guy.
There was a running joke about the top 10 suspects, and sitting around over beers, we would begin to say, okay, well, you know, you're number 1, you're number 3, you're number 5. Bruce, in fact, would put himself high on the list. We all considered it a joke. It was just sort of a thing to kind of deal with the tension.
Could this career Army scientist, whose job it is to protect Americans from biological weapons, really be the anthrax mailer? The FBI is building its case. Over 6 years after the anthrax attacks, the FBI has a new prime suspect. And it's one of the very scientists assigned to investigate the crime. Dr. Bruce Ivins. The key piece of evidence, a DNA trail that leads from the killer anthrax powder to a laboratory flask in his possession.
The RMR 1029 strain of anthrax contained in that specific flask was the murder weapon. And once that was determined, it was looked at who had access to this flask. Bruce Ivins was the main senior custodian of that flask and that strain of anthrax.
But scientists who work closely with Dr. Ivins say that doesn't prove his guilt.
Many different people had access to the RMR 1029 flask. Many different cultures had been taken out of that and even distributed. My laboratory had material that came out of the RMR 1029 flask.
There were approximately 20 laboratories that received some material from that flask. After that, then those 20 labs, in turn, could have given it to anybody.
But the FBI's case doesn't rest on the flask alone. It points out that Ivins was one of just a handful of microbiologists with the expertise to cultivate the powdered anthrax that was used in the deadly letters.
Someone would have to grow up a batch of the Ames strain. They would have to harvest those cells, clean them up a little bit by washing them, and then you'd want to dry those spores, turn them into a powder that then could be put in the letters.
It's a process that takes long hours in the lab. The FBI reviews Ivins' timesheets from the period of the mailings in 2001. And what they find appears to confirm their suspicions.
He was alone for long periods of time in his laboratory on the days preceding the mailings.
And he never was able to explain that anomaly in his work schedule.
While FBI evidence mounts, Ivins' colleagues remain unconvinced.
The thing about science is that experiments don't end at 5 o'clock. It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job.
It's circumstantial evidence, so the FBI checks out whether Ivins could have sent the anthrax letters from the mailbox they've traced them back to, located in Princeton, New Jersey.
If you didn't have an alibi for the period of time when those letters were mailed and you could drive to where that mailbox was, you were a prime suspect.
Ivins lives a 3.5-hour drive from the Princeton mailbox. The FBI confirms he could have driven through the night, mailed the letters, and returned in time for work the next day. While his colleagues can't argue with the timetable, they do question Ivins' motive. The FBI claims it was professional self-preservation to stop proposed cuts to his research.
If Bruce Ivins' lab was being defunded, the perfect thing for justifying an increase in funding would be an anthrax mailing.
An anthrax bioterror attack would reignite funding for vaccine research long into the future. But some Fort Detrick insiders say there had been no threats of budget cuts at the time of the mailings.
The interesting fact about that was, in 2001, Bruce's program was fully funded and looked to be stable for years to come.
Even if that's true, Ivins had a patent for an anthrax vaccine. Could this have been a twisted bid to boost royalty checks? Again, colleagues are skeptical.
He was entitled to a fraction of a percent. He had to share that with a number of other people. So I don't believe that that was any kind of motivation or motive.
I have a bunch of patents and I make almost no money off of them. It's hard for me to imagine that Bruce would have done it for money.
The flask, the timesheets, the motive, all put forth by the FBI as evidence, all disputed by Ivins' colleagues. But the Bureau knows something they don't. Dr. Bruce Ivins has a dark side. Unbeknownst to the public, in 2008, Dr. Bruce Ivins becomes the FBI's main suspect in the anthrax mailings 7 years earlier. But many who work with Ivins think the FBI are focusing on the wrong man.
Most people that work with him do not believe that Bruce had anything to do with this.
Yet according to evidence uncovered by the FBI, there was a hidden side to Bruce Ivins. Beginning with a strange fixation he had with a college sorority.
The FBI learns that Bruce Ivins, as a younger man, he had an obsession with a Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority sister.
And in fact, on 2 occasions, he burglarized sorority houses and took ritualistic materials.
This, in their mind, seems to indicate some obsessive tendencies in Ivins' character.
A possibility backed up by a therapist consulted by Ivins during the anthrax mailings investigation.
He tells group therapists that he's considering violent reactions to the FBI. He starts talking about potentially killing coworkers.
Tipped off about the threats, on July 12, 2008, federal agents raid Ivins' home. What they find is alarming.
In Ivins' house, the FBI found some material that they thought indicated that Ivins might be unstable and dangerous.
The material includes body armor and 253 rounds of ammunition.
He might potentially retaliate against what he increasingly sees as a government witch hunt of him.
It's a side of a man that his colleagues simply don't recognize.
I didn't see the dark side of Bruce. The fact that he had had these psychological problems was not obvious to me. He seemed like a maybe slightly esoteric but normal individual.
It's suggested that his strange personality traits could have been exaggerated by the FBI and exacerbated by the pressure of their investigation.
Material the FBI released was basically very cherry-picked. All these things painted a different picture of who and what Bruce really was.
They believe that following the identification of Flask RMR 1029 as the murder weapon, the pressure on Ivins grew intolerable, placing him on a fatal downward spiral.
The FBI came in and removed him from the building in handcuffs. He was a broken person at that point.
Sometimes when the FBI has a suspect in mind, they do things that might pressure that suspect into possibly making a mistake and revealing even more of his guilt.
Under round-the-clock FBI surveillance, Ivins begins drinking heavily. In July 2008, he's committed to a Baltimore psychiatric hospital.
His wife picks him up on July 24th, 2008. Ivins goes to a pharmacy nearby and he buys antipsychotics, he buys antidepressants, and he buys a massive amount of over-the-counter acetaminophen. Ivins writes a note to his wife. It says that he's got a headache, but most importantly, he wants to sleep undisturbed by her. And the note even specifically says, "Please let me sleep."
On the night of July 26th, Ivins takes excessive amounts of acetaminophen, a pain reliever that in extremely high doses can cause organ failure. At 1 a.m., his wife finds him comatose on the bathroom floor.
Ivins is taken to Frederick Memorial Hospital. His liver is under attack, his kidneys are severely damaged. A nurse asks him at the hospital if Ivins overdosed intentionally. He nods in an indication that he was trying to kill himself.
2 days later, Ivins passes away. His wife and children are at his bedside. Reports say he took his own life, and colleagues are shocked and confused.
At that point, we didn't know what the cause of death was or anything about what had really happened.
At Ivins' memorial service, the church is packed. He's remembered both as a brilliant scientist and as a fun-loving, even playful individual.
Bruce Ivins is known as kind of a cut-up. He's very social and friendly with his colleagues, a kind of nerdy researcher.
But a week after Ivins dies, the Justice Department names him as the bioterrorist behind the 2001 attacks.
Based upon the totality of the evidence we had gathered against him, we are confident that Dr. Ivins was the only person responsible for these attacks.
After Ivins died, the case was shut and hasn't been pursued by the FBI since then.
While there's little doubt Ivins killed himself, without a suicide note, there's no agreement on why. If he was the anthrax killer, as the FBI believes to this day, then his reason is clear.
One could come to the conclusion that Ivins killed himself rather than face trial, be found guilty, and go to jail or be put to death.
But many still doubt his guilt. They believe it's possible he chose death rather than face the humiliating revelations of his obsession with a sorority.
It put tremendous stress and pressure on his marital relationship and his relationship with his children. It also called into question his professional reputation as one of the most preeminent microbiologists in America.
Add to that the mental pressure of becoming the FBI's #1 suspect.
Somebody who was already in a mentally disturbed state, it may have just pushed them over the edge.
I do think in some respects the pressure he was feeling from the investigation led him to take such drastic action.
After Ivins' death, a final mystery. Faint blue writing is found on his left leg.
There's some speculation that he was trying to write out some message.
Its meaning has never been deciphered.
Was it a confession? Was it a denial? Was he trying to say that he was the anthrax killer? Was he trying to say that he was definitely not the anthrax killer? It's just something that, unfortunately, we're just never going to have an answer for.
The case against Bruce Ivins has never been proven in a court of law. Close friends and colleagues continue to proclaim his innocence, leaving one critical, unanswered question.
If it wasn't Dr. Bruce Ivins, who was it?
After his death in 2008, the Justice Department names Bruce Ivins as the anthrax mailer in a dramatic press conference.
We are confident that Dr. Ivins was the only person responsible for these attacks.
But with no confession, no autopsy, and no trial, there's room for doubt.
I don't know who the anthrax mailer was, but the FBI didn't present the kind of evidence that would inspire a lot of confidence that Bruce Ivins was the anthrax killer.
Richard Lambert, special agent in charge of the FBI investigation, left the Bureau 2 years before Ivins was named as the anthrax mailer. He's not sure the FBI got the right man.
What the government has produced is all of the evidence indicative of Bruce Ivins' guilt. What has not been produced and what would have been required to be produced in a trial is all of the evidence that points in a different direction or that suggests that Bruce Ivins was not the anthrax mailer.
If it wasn't Dr. Bruce Ivins, who was it?
There may be a clue in Kandahar, Afghanistan. One that could point back to the initial suspects, Al-Qaeda.
U.S. forces in 2001, when they raid Al-Qaeda facilities in Afghanistan, come up with this extensive documentary evidence that Al-Qaeda is very actively pursuing anthrax.
Secret letters are discovered that reveal the efforts of a Pakistani microbiologist to obtain anthrax for Al-Qaeda. A letter from 1999, heavily redacted by authorities, explains he's been unable to acquire anthrax. But in a later document, he announces, "I successfully achieved the targets."
It became clear that prior to 9/11, Al-Qaeda did have a biological weapons program in place. They had acquired a laboratory, they had acquired laboratory equipment, and they were well on their way to attempting to acquire anthrax.
Scientific investigations had proven that the anthrax powder contained in the letters came from an American laboratory. Could Al-Qaeda have gotten the AIM strain from a U.S. lab? Henry Hine says it's possible.
Transfer of bacterial strains was pretty free and loose prior to 2001. You could transport things in your pocket, and that was perfectly acceptable. As long as you had paperwork declaring what it was, you could walk it to your car and drive down the road with it.
In the wake of 9/11, reports emerged that one of the hijackers may have been suffering an anthrax-related lesion. And even more alarming, testimony that lead hijacker Mohammed Atta had tried to rent a crop duster before the September 11th attacks.
He said he was an engineer and he wanted to build a chemical tank that would fit inside the aircraft and take up every available square inch of the aircraft except for where the pilot would be sitting.
Could he have been looking for a way to spray anthrax on the public?
It's a pretty safe assumption that an organization willing to fly planes into buildings would not hesitate to launch a biological attack.
Was it Al-Qaeda, Bruce Ivins, or an unknown lone wolf?
I think in the end, this case revolves around two factors. Number one, Bruce Ivins' erratic behavior both before and during the investigation, and the simple fact of who had access to the instrumentality of death in this case. When all is said and done, Bruce Ivins was the only one who could have done it.
But Agent Lambert is not convinced.
Ultimately, it's very dissatisfying because it is a circumstantial case. And what I know to be true is that there are significant material omissions about other facets of this investigation and what they yielded that would cause a reasonably objective person to question the strength of Bruce Ivins' guilt. Personally, I don't know if Bruce Ivins is the anthrax mailer. I do not believe there is enough evidence with proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
The official conclusion of the FBI is that the anthrax case that started with the murder of 5 innocent people ended with the suicide of Bruce Ivins. But the lack of proof leaves a chilling possibility. The attacker could still be lying in wait, ready to strike again.
If Bruce Ivins wasn't the anthrax mailer, that means the true culprit is still at large, and that's a very scary thought.